I was, this is an interesting data to look at, and this is it's called 247wallstreet.com, and they're ranking the worst states to be black in the US. And this is just a primer before we go on with everything. And I always say this: white people in the South are honest about their bias, their racism, their disdain for black people. But since quite a number of them are Christian and serious Christians, they try to at least treat people fairly to some extent. What you have in the North is that people who are so-called liberals, they feel they are better than everybody else. They are better than those dirty Southerners who are racist, but they themselves are even more racist and more prejudiced than the Southerners. So what you have happening is that a lot of people, black people who left the South and went to the North, got segregated, pushed into communities that basically had no opportunities. And I'm doing this segment because of the current issue with in Milwaukee, the riots in Milwaukee. There are people in Milwaukee who have never been to like a white neighborhood. They just grow up to like they're 10, 12, 15, and they never been to black neighborhoods. Their governor, Scott Walker, vetoing public transportation that would have helped create jobs and get people to be to move further from the to be able to travel further from the the center of the city, which is concentrated with blacks and less opportunities. So I'm doing this segment in the spirit of that. But the worst states for black people in the US, majority of them are from what? The North. And a couple, I think there are about 7 from the northeast mainly, 2 from the Midwest, and 1 from the South. The worst places are all the 5 top worst places for black people are all in the North, which tells you that the northern whites are generally not any better than the southern whites. You can make an argument that they are even worse, because they hide their bias, and they tend to accuse Southerners of being more biased or being more racist. So let's go through the list. So in the number 10 is Arkansas. The percentage of black residents is 15.7%. Black home ownership is 42.8%, 15th highest. Black incarceration rate is 2,432 per 100,000, which is 24th highest. Black unemployment rate is 16%, 16.5%, 4th highest, versus the unemployment rate overall in the state, which is 7.8%. So basically, white unemployment rate is probably somewhere around 4 to 5% because of the disproportionate representation of blacks in the unemployment. And this is the only southern state in the survey. Imagine that. So look at Arkansas and look at Kansas. Kansas has 5.8% black residents, 36.1% black home ownership, black incarceration rate 3.306, 3,306 per 100,000 people. Black unemployment rate is 11.8%. Unemployment rate overall is 5.6%. So white unemployment rate is probably somewhere around 3 or 4%. This is crazy. This is crazy, man. Let's go. New Jersey, a typical northern state. Percentage of black residents 13.7, black home ownership 39%, black incarceration rate 1,992 per 100,000. people. Black unemployment rate 13.0%. Unemployment rate overall 8.2%. So generally, again, about a few more, the white unemployment rate is considerably, much lower. Number 7 is Connecticut, and this is a liberal hub. Percentage of black residents 10.3%, black home ownership 35%, black incarceration rate 2,260 per 100,000 people, black unemployment rate 13.3%, unemployment rate overall 7.7%. So the black home ownership versus white home ownership, there's a difference of 41% in Connecticut. Imagine that. Michigan, of course, another northern state, 13.7%, black residents, black home ownership 42%, black incarceration rate 2,169 per 100,000, black unemployment 16.5%, black unemployment overall 8.6%. Let's go. Pennsylvania, another liberal hub. Percentage of black residents 11.0%, black home ownership 43.1%, black incarceration rate 3,269 per 100,000 people, black unemployment 14.4%, and unemployment overall 7.5%. That's almost triples the unemployment rate overall. That means that white unemployment is probably somewhere around 5 or 4% thereabout. Let's go to number 4. Number 4, Illinois, Obama's home, state. Percentage of black residents 14.4%, black home ownership 38.5%, black incarceration rate 2,128 per 100,000 people, black unemployment rate 17.0%, unemployment rate overall 9.1%. Illinois suffers generally, over job losses and stuff like that. So that's to be expected. Rhode Island, another liberal bastion, or northern state, as it were. Percentage of black residents 6.4%. Black home ownership rate 29.4%. Can you imagine that? So among the black people in Rhode Island, over 70% of them don't have homes. Black incarceration rate 1,884 per 100,000. Black unemployment 16%. Unemployment rate overall 9.2%. Minnesota, north, just south of Canada. Percentage of black residents 5.4%. Black home ownership rate 25%, more than 74%. Just about almost 75% of black people don't have homes. Black unemployment 15%. Unemployment rate just 4.9%. So that means white unemployment is probably under 4% in Minnesota. Now, Wisconsin, which is the issue at hand. Wisconsin is the worst. Wisconsin has 6.2% blacks, mostly concentrated in the Milwaukee suburban area. Black home ownership rate 28.1%. Black incarceration rate 4,042 per 100,000. Black unemployment rate 15.0%. Unemployment rate overall 6.7%. Based on all these indices we are showing, Milwaukee is the worst state for black Americans. That the website says typical black Wisconsin households made roughly half the white median household income, a wider income gap than in the majority of states. Wisconsin's black residents were also far less likely than white residents to have health insurance, with a gap of more than $30 percent point. Black Americans in Wisconsin are at a much greater risk of death than their white peers as well, which could be due in part to poor health coverage. There are 980 deaths per 100,000 people among Wisconsin's black population, one of the highest rates nationwide. This figure represents 288 more deaths than the comparable rate for white residents, nearly the largest gap reviewed. Black Wisconsin residents were also nearly 10 times more likely than white residents to go to prison. 10 times, nearly the largest gap. Black children in Wisconsin had worse educational outcomes than both their white classmates and their black peers in other states. Milwaukee led the nation of most racially segregated U.S. cities, which may actually make the problem in Wisconsin more a problem for Milwaukee, where the vast majority of state's black population lives. So when you hear idiots like Sheriff David Clarke come out and say stupid things, Milwaukee's problem is partly because of what the state did. The place is thoroughly segregated. Nobody, if you go to the suburbs, you rarely find black people. How are they gonna have opportunities when the majority of opportunities traditionally were created by what and for white people? When the slaves and the black people went to the north, they didn't have the opportunities. The state, the community which they found themselves had the opportunities. If you are not ready to extend the opportunities to the new residents, how are they gonna get the opportunities? How are they going to become, how are they going to build their lives? So this is part of the challenges we have. Everybody has to work hard for what they get in life, but people need help. If you the traditionally affluent and well-to-do community, because when blacks came out of slavery, they had nothing. So when they come to your state and then you run away and leave them to their own devices without any help, how are they going to make it? And that's basically what happened in a lot of these northern states, and Wisconsin is a quintessential example of that. I live in Texas. There's so many jobs for a lot of people in Texas, including black people. We might have some racist police here and there, but it doesn't even compare to places like Wisconsin, which is in the north. So people need to be careful. When they throw issues like the north, the south is backward, is racist and things like that. Places in New York is one of the worst states for black residents. Stop and frisk and all sorts of things. So Northerners need to stop getting on their high horses and start dealing with the problems in the community that they've created by xenophobia, by racism. Because if someone is black and he's coming into your community and you all run away to the suburbs, if they cannot buy properties in the suburbs, how do you expect them to make a living? How do you expect them to build lives for themselves? Of course they cannot, because you need people at the top to help those from the bottom to get there, especially for a group coming out of slavery, coming out of nothing. A lot of families came out of slavery with just the clothes on their back, not even sandals.